Hi folks, welcome to today's lesson on the sine ratio. You may have seen a related video using the sine ratio to find a side. We're going to be finding an angle using the sine ratio today. So let's crack on and get the job done. Trigonometry means three-angled measure, and therefore it deals with angles in triangles. In this section, we are only looking at right-angled triangles. It's important to remember that. And in each case, we will be given one length and one angle, and we will be asked to find the length of one of the other sides. Here is a right-angled triangle, and there is an angle marked in. Imagine the angle was an eye, and the eye of the triangle always looks at the opposite side. We probably know that the side opposite the right angle is called the hypotenuse, and the third side of the triangle we call the adjacent. Here's another right-angled triangle, and this time that angle is marked in. Remember, if that were an eye, it looks at the opposite side. The hypotenuse is opposite the right angle, and the third side is the adjacent. The sine ratio, spelled S-I-N-E, is the ratio of the opposite side to the hypotenuse in a right-angled triangle. In this example, the opposite side is 10 centimeters and the hypotenuse is 18 centimeters. So the sine of angle C is 10 divided by 18. But in the second example, the angle is marked in at point A. Therefore, we don't write sine C, we will be writing sine A equals the opposite of the hypotenuse, which is 15 divided by 20. Sine 30 degrees is 0.5 or 1/2. And what that means is, in a right-angled triangle with an angle of 30 degrees, the ratio of the opposite side to the hypotenuse is 1/2. Now, if we have got the angle and we wish to find out what the ratio is, we would press the sine button on our calculators. And there highlighted is where you'll find the sine button on your calculator. So if you have got the angle of 30 degrees and you type into your calculator sine 30 degrees, it will give you 0.5. It will give you the ratio of the opposite to the hypotenuse. But what if you know that ratio, but you don't know what the angle is? How do you get from the ratio to the angle? Well, to go back the other way, we would press on our calculators the shift sign button. Now, shift, if you look on the calculator, is highlighted with the yellow dot. So you'd press the shift button, then the sign button, and then you would input your ratio, and it would give you the angle. Let's have a look at an example here. We've got the ratio of the opposite to the hypotenuse as being 4:7. We're trying to find out what the accompanying angle will be. We actually write that sine to the -1. We actually pronounce that as inverse sine. That -1 means inverse. So we would read this as saying x equals inverse sine of 4/7. In order to find that on our calculators, these are the buttons that we would press. We press shift and then sine. That will give us shift sine or inverse sine. Then we need to type in the ratio, 4 divided by 7. Importantly now, we would close the bracket and then press equals. And when you press those buttons on your calculator, you should find that the answer you get is 34.8499, and we would round an angle off to 1 decimal place, which would be 34.8. In example 2, we are given that the ratio between the opposite side and the hypotenuse is 5 to 9. Therefore, x, our angle, is inverse sine. Remember, that's sine to the -1 means inverse sine of 5/9. And we would press on our calculator shift and sine, that's inverse sine. Now we would input the ratio 5 divided by 9. Importantly, close the bracket, then press equals, and we should get 33.7489, and we'd round off to 1 decimal place. Let's try this now on a type of question that we're much more likely to see. We're trying to find the angle x. The eye of the angle looks at the opposite side, so 7 centimeters is the opposite side, and opposite the right angle is the 13 centimeters, so the 13 centimeters is the hypotenuse. So the ratio of the angle is opposite over hypotenuse, which is 7/13. To find x, we write inverse sine of 7/13. So on our calculators, this is what we would press: shift, sine, 7, divide by 13, close bracket, equals 32.5789, and we'd round that off to 1 decimal place. Here in example 4, we've got the angle unknown marked as x, and the eye of the angle looks at the opposite side, so 18 centimeters is the opposite side. Sine of the angle is the ratio of the opposite divided by the hypotenuse, so that would be 18 divided by 25. Then we would write x equals inverse sine of 18 divided by 25. Put that into our calculators and round off to 1 decimal place. In example 5, we've got x, the unknown angle, and remember the eye of the angle looks at the opposite side. 8.2 is the opposite side, 16 is the hypotenuse. The sine of the angle is the ratio of the opposite divided by the hypotenuse, so that's 8.2 divided by 16. We write x equals inverse sine of 8.2 divided by 16. Type that into our calculators and round off to 1 decimal place. Let's put all that together then in a recap. The sine ratio is a ratio of the opposite side to the hypotenuse. With an angle marked in, the eye of the angle looks at the opposite side and the right angle looks on at the hypotenuse. The sine of the angle is the opposite divided by the hypotenuse. To convert from the ratio back into the angle, we press shift sine. We would write it as sine to the power of -1, but it's pronounced inverse sine. And it is usual to round angles off to 1 decimal place. And if there's anything about this you haven't understood, just watch the video back. If you have understood it, that's great, because that's the job done.